Hi guys, how's it going? Eastbayanglers here. Today we're talking all about how to fight the wind. I know you guys have been fishing before and the wind's been difficult to deal with. It's been, blowing hard and gusts, coming through, blowing all your stuff around, and it can be frustrating. So today we're going to focus on how to battle the wind, how to fight the wind, you know. So whether you're on the bank, the boat, we're going to talk today about how to fight the wind, and we're going to talk about some of the things you can do. And I like to think of it in the sense of you want to use the wind as your friend. So the wind, instead of fighting the wind, there's ways you can basically use the wind to your advantage. So here's the situations I'm going to talk about and I'll explain. So when you're fishing in the wind, a lot of people, let's say it's 15 to 25 mile per hour winds out and you're on a point, and you're fishing and you're directly into the wind. A lot of people might think that's not a good thing. I think it's great. A really good area to hang out would be, a wind-blown bank, stuff like that. Maybe, island tops, points, creek channels, things of that nature, structure that you might know about on the bottom. All that's good stuff. So, and rock piles. But, when you're fishing in the wind, sometimes, it's a little bit difficult to stay positioned. Whatever you're, whether you're on the bank, whether you're on the boat, sometimes after, let's say I'm on a point for a while, or maybe I'm not on a point, maybe I'm exposed somewhere else on the bank, or maybe I'm in a flow tube. Eventually that wind, facing directly into that wind, really wears you down. It gets your face a bit, get kind of like I don't want to call it whiplash, but you get a, basically you just feel kind of, it's hard to explain, but the wind does fatigue you. And after a while, it is nice to, get away from that wind. So to some extent, one of the ways I manage the wind is obviously windbreakers are great, but having, one that covers the face is essential. And generally, I use a HUK breaker as well as a couple others. And the HUK's been working really well for me. The next level, I've got the rain jacket over that, some vests and other jackets that I use. So the wind, you have to have windbreakers. You have to have, some clothing that is going to keep you warm, because those winds, sometimes or most of the time, the wind is, pretty cold. So when you're fishing on the bank or in a float tube or a kayak or a boat, and you're trying to stay in position. Let's, for example, talk about if you're on a boat, you're trying to stay in position. If you have GPS lock, that's an option. I would preferably anchor in the wind. If it's windy, I'd rather just anchor the boat, because it's just, it's actually a lot better, in my opinion, stay more so in place than you would with the trolling motor constantly trying to catch up with that wind and constantly kind of, jerking the boat around trying to catch up. So I've had those experiences, and it's not fun. Throwing an anchor is better. Sometimes, to a certain extent, you can face directly into the wind and you can sometimes, just by manually using that foot pedal, get away with it. But it's quite difficult once the winds start approaching 20, 18, 17 to 20 miles an hour. Things really get difficult. Around 22 to 24 miles an hour is on the boat, on the water, is about when you can't be on the water. So I mean, you can, but it's not safe. So as far as, let's say you're in the float tube or a kayak, an anchor, excellent option. Honestly, when it's that windy, a lot of times I like to bank fish. Bank fish gives you a lot of advantages. You can kind of sit into a position for a little bit. A lot of other things I like to do with the kayaks and the float tubes is I like to, I carry a bungee, and I carry a lanyard and some other things, some clips, and that way I can like tie up to a buoy, if I'm in a tube or a kayak, and let's say you're near some docks, there's nobody in that slip, just clip on, hang out for a minute, slow down, and there's a couple ways, So in general, I love fishing in the wind for a lot of reasons. A lot of it is there's low light, usually conditions. Well, I'm sorry, there's not usually, but what I meant to say was there are the light that penetrates through the water is just a bit it's a bit hindered, and those fish don't get as good of a look at the profile, the bait itself. So a lot of times the wind is your friend, and clear water, it can be very difficult. I've fished in the wind with 20-pound fluorocarbon on crankbaits, and it worked good, and it wasn't, somebody else, I had to use some of their 20-pound fluoro, and spool up, but wasn't ideal. It worked, and I felt extremely confident that they couldn't really see the line, even though it was 20-pound test. Yeah, it was like a clear water fishery, but it was really windy. Another thing is stuff just starts moving around in the wind, and I do believe that the chop, once you get a certain amount of chop on the water, that's a real trigger for fish, and I think they get really active. Just in my experiences catching fish, fishing all the years that I've fished. Yeah, wind is, the elements in general are all triggers. The thing is, you have to kind of know, it's almost like, it reminds me of a tide, when you're fishing the bay. It's like sometimes the bite's going to be on the incoming, sometimes the bite's going to be on the outgoing, and sometimes there's not going to be a bite at all. It's interesting. So, as far as the wind goes, you got to dress warm, layer up, make sure that you are, considering the factors, always having extra clothing in the truck or the car, kind of keeping, sometimes, the wind is so bad that I do wear glasses in those situations because the wind is just so bad. And a lot of times I wear a beanie. I used to wear a hat, and I still do sometimes because you can't always predict the wind. But had a lot of issues trying to hold the hat down in some windy conditions. The beanie is much easier, even in extreme winds. So I mean, I hope this helps, guys. You know, we're talking windy conditions. You're trying to fish. Let's say, you know, you're trout fishing at Lake Chabot, for example, and you got your bobber out, you got your rig, your setup. What are you going to do? The wind is making your bobber swing left and right and back and forth or whatever so much so aggressively that you can't really tell what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. I'll tell you. Just be patient, and you know, if you actually do get a bite, you know, that bobber is gonna, I mean, it's basically gonna go up, and it's gonna go up in usually a faster manner. A lot of times having that bobber bounce around like that in the wind almost kind of changes the angle of that, of the kind of changes the angle of that bait that you have out there. So you're kind of moving that a little bit with basically the wind is moving the bobber, and every time the bobber goes side to side, it's pulling on, you know, I have a light sinker, real light, 1/8 ounce, 1/4, 1/5 type of thing. But it's gonna move that sinker a bit. That bait's gonna move a little bit more erratic, and then you've got that water, that chop I was talking about, and the current under the water. You know, a lot of places have current, so you just have to remember that on those windy days, you know, if you're bait fishing and you're floating power bait at Lake Chabot, your bait is bouncing all around, it's moving all around, blowing all around in the water. And sometimes that's exactly what's going to trigger a bite. So that's, you know, it's very ideal. You know, a lot of times when it's just a real slick, calm day, you know, your bait is under that water. And like I said, there are some underwater currents, but it depends on the fishery. So you have to have a natural annual creek or river that would be substantial and feeds into a body of water for it to be that. Like Lake Chabot, for example, you know, not much of a current, but like I said, you know, depending on the way a wind blows all day, it really does push the water. It pushes the bait fish. So keep this in mind, guys. I hope you guys catch more fish the next time you go out fishing, and stay tuned for more. Subscribe, like, and try to keep in mind that you know, it's a hard game. You know, going out, the weather's, the elements. I'm sorry, the weather, the elements. You know, I'm gonna tell you what, it pays off. There's a couple days, you know, every year I'm out there in some brutal weather, and I shake my head and I ask myself, what am I doing out there? Well, I'll tell you, it's all the other days where I do okay, I do great, I do exceptional, and a lot of times, you know, that's just the fun of it. You know, you never know exactly what's going to happen, but for the most part, you know, you put the time in, you do your, you know, pay your dues, man. You're gonna start hooking up, and you're gonna catch fish. You're gonna pattern in on every little thing. So I think I'm gonna wrap this one up, and I hope you guys take care. Enjoy the holidays.